The world froze in shock. Within minutes, the headlines spread. Burkina Faso arrests American executives in a secret underground gold tunnel. On CNN, blinding gold light shimmered across the faces of men kneeling underground behind them, tons of unshipped gold. In Washington, phones rang non-stop. In Paris, the same image replayed like a nightmare. Across Africa, millions held their breath. For the first time in decades, a poor nation had dared to touch what no one else would, the very hands that had plundered this continent for centuries. Before the cameras, Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't shout slogans or preach hatred. He simply stood in the golden glare and said one quiet sentence: "They've been digging our gold for years. Today we're just digging back justice." That single line became a global headline. But behind that moment was a long, silent night of preparation. A war not just against the thieves of gold, but against a system that had forced a continent to kneel in silence. Out on the streets of Ouagadougou, people poured out. An old woman clutched her crackling radio, hands trembling as she listened. A child asked, "Mama, will they give us clean water now?" No one answered. Yet in the mother's eyes, for the first time, a new light flickered hope. Inside Western embassies, alarms blared. "This act will spark a diplomatic crisis," an American official shouted. But for the people of Burkina Faso, it wasn't a crisis. It was the beginning of dawn. As the sun rose over the Sahel, its light swept across dry fields and caught the red, green, gold flag fluttering proudly. A young soldier looked toward the gold tunnel where those who once saw his land as a mine now knelt before its people. He whispered, "This isn't just gold. This is dignity." That night, the world kept talking about a precious metal. But in Burkina Faso, they knew the truth. The gold was just an excuse. What they had truly reclaimed was the soul of a nation. The night in the Sahel was thick, like a layer of black dust. The moon hid behind clouds, leaving only dim lights glowing from the mine where they said billions in gold were being siphoned away every night. In the sand, shadows moved silently, ghost-like figures born of the earth itself. They were Captain Ibrahim Traoré's special unit. He said little. He knelt, scooped a handful of dry sand, and whispered, "This land once fed us, now we must protect it." A red signal light blinked. The raid began. No gunfire, only the wind sliced by footsteps. They crawled beneath barbed wire, disabled the cameras, and cut power to the entire site within 3 minutes. Darkness swallowed everything except the glint of moonlight on weapons ready to strike. At the command post, Leila Khan, the only young journalist allowed to accompany them, tightened her grip on the camera. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding. Someone had once told her, "The truth always lies beneath the ground." And now, she was descending into that ground where the secrets of a whole continent had been buried. As steel door ground open, the underground vault revealed itself, its walls glowing with yellow light. Not jewelry gold, but raw, burning chunks stacked like stones of fire. In the center, silver-haired men in white shirts trembled under flashlight beams. They were the executives of an international mining company. One stammered, "We have legal permits." Traoré said nothing. He pointed to the words stamped on the sacks, "Property of Burkina Faso." "What permit?" he asked, his voice low but echoing against the walls. "Allows you to poison my people's water? What permit allows you to dig out the soul of this land?" No one answered. None could. Outside, armored trucks rumbled to life. The convoy carried the once proud men through villages long abandoned. People gathered on both sides of the road. An old woman held up a faded photo of her grandchild, lost to poisoned water, and whispered through her tears, "Don't let them take anything else." Leila turned her camera toward Captain Traoré. The light flickered in his eyes, not the shine of gold, but a fierce, aching light of belief and sorrow intertwined. "Tonight," he said slowly, "we didn't just arrest gold thieves. We reclaimed the soul of our motherland." And as the convoy rolled away from the mine, dawn broke across the horizon. The first light spilled over the desert, golden, radiant, but this time it came not from metal, but from pride reborn. That night, Ouagadougou did not sleep. Power in the city center had been cut under the excuse of emergency maintenance, but everyone knew it was the same old trick the former regime used to silence the news. Still, in a small back room behind the abandoned studio of Radio UA Libre, Leila Khan sat before a microphone. The only light came from the flickering red sign that read "On Air." Before her lay the papers recovered from the raid contracts, wire transfers, forged permits, cold numbers that each carried a human life behind them. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from knowing that once her voice went live, no one in that room would be safe again. She took a deep breath, adjusted the mic, and spoke, her voice breaking, yet firm. People of Burkina Faso, tonight, I'm not telling a story. I'm telling you the truth. One by one, she read out the names of companies, ministers, and foreign banks where the money flowed. Her voice grew hotter, burning through the darkness. For years, they said our gold was traded for development. But they traded it for disease, for poisoned water, for dead villages. I hold the proof in my hands, contracts that sold our future for scraps. Out in the night, old radios crackled to life in cafes, bus stations, and market stalls. The signal was weak, the sound distorted, but every word came through. Justice begins when silence ends. An old man polishing his oil lamp stopped to listen. A village teacher held her child close, tears running down her face as the static whispered hope. At a border post, young soldiers paused, slipped worn earphones over their heads, and listened. No one spoke. They didn't need to. They knew something in their country had shifted forever. The phone lines lit up with calls from every corner of the land. I'm a farmer from Bobo Dioulasso. My fields died from their waste. I'm a miner. My brother was buried alive in their tunnels. I'm a teacher. I haven't been paid in 6 months while the minister owns a mansion in France. Each voice was like a shovel striking deeper into the truth. And for the first time, the forgotten were being heard. As the clock struck midnight, Layla's voice softened, trembling with emotion. We can't bring back the lives we've lost, but we can reclaim our dignity. Captain Traoré made them kneel. Now it's time for the people to rise. In that moment, the city lay in darkness, but the radio still burned bright, a beacon of truth. Outside, people began to move. Groups with flashlights and cell phones drifted toward the square. No one told them to. It was just one voice in the night turning into thunder. From afar, Captain Traoré looked up at the sky. From his base, he could hear the faint echo of her broadcast carried by the wind. We rise tonight. He smiled faintly, and thus the uprising of light began with a single voice in the dark. The next morning, Captain Traoré's convoy left the capital, heading north toward what was once the richest mining region in the country, now reduced to a grey wasteland. No birds, no water, just withered trees twisted like hands reaching for help. They stopped at an abandoned village. The name Ouagadougou was barely visible on the faded wooden sign. Collapsed roofs, rusted wells. No children ran to greet the visitors. Only an old woman leaning on a cane stepped out from a crumbling house. Her name was Salamata Doumbia. She looked at the convoy, then at the soldier leading it, the man the whole nation was now speaking of. You've come, she said, her voice rough like wind through ashes. I never thought I'd live to see someone in uniform return here. Traoré approached, removed his beret, and bowed his head. I had to see it with my own eyes, ma'am. She led him through the remains of the village. On the stained walls, the faded drawings of children still clung suns, rivers, and golden dots. They came, she said quietly, promising schools and hospitals. But what they left behind was the smell of metal in our water and the sound of crying in the night. They stopped at a sealed well, its mouth covered by rusted tin. The old woman tapped it with her cane. The hollow echo rang out like the earth itself, crying. That last night my grandson Karim was thirsty. He drank from this well. The next morning he didn't wake up, he was 8. They said it was fever, but I know this water was no longer water. Traoré stood in silence. The wind carried the scent of scorched earth. He dropped to one knee and pressed his hand to the cracked soil. I promise, he said hoarsely. Those who did this will bow to this ground, to you and to Karim's spirit. Madame Salamata studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Don't just make them bow, she said. Make them see the place where they killed life. Laila Khan lifted her camera. In her frame stood the young soldier and the old woman side by side in a dead field, the black pits of the mines yawning behind them like the mouths of demons. The noon sun poured down, glinting on the handful of soil the old woman held tight. This is no longer gold, she whispered slowly. This is our blood. Traoré looked down at the ground. In his eyes, fire and water met. And he knew, from that moment on, His battle was no longer political. It was an oath between man and Mother Earth. That day, the earth itself became a courtroom. The golden tunnel, once a monument to greed, now blazed with white light. Cameras tilted downward, capturing every inch. The walls glittered with traces of gold, each dust mote reflecting the light like candles illuminating the truth. In the center of the chamber knelt the foreign men, executives, experts, financiers, their hands bound behind their backs, white shirts stained with dust, faces bowed and lost. Before them there was no judge, no prosecutor. Only the people, those whose water had been stolen, whose land was lost, whose children never came home. The first to step forward was Madame Salamata Doumbia. Cane in hand, she walked slowly but firmly, stopping before the man who had signed the contract that doomed her village. "You called it cooperation," she said, her voice steady, hard as stone. "But you weren't digging for gold, you were digging graves. You didn't take our soil, you took our souls. And this," she lifted a worn photograph, "is my grandson, 8 years old. He died from the water you poisoned." No one spoke. Somewhere in the crowd, a stifled sob broke the silence. Then a miner came forward. His calloused hands held a dented safety helmet. "This belonged to my brother," he said quietly. "He died when the tunnel wall collapsed. You didn't stop the machines. You told us to keep digging. You saw gold, we saw graves." The words echoed across the chamber, rebounding off the walls like the earth itself was speaking. Finally, Captain Traoré stepped forward. He didn't climb a podium. He stood among them, where light met shadow, where gold met dust. "You believed power lived in money, in laws, in diplomatic protection," he said firmly. "But today you stand in a place where no law can shield you from the people." He turned toward the villagers, his voice rising. "This gold was stolen from us in darkness. Today, we bring it back into the light, not to boast, but to judge." The crowd roared as one, a thunderous cry, "Justice! Justice!" The golden walls quivered, shimmering with the reflection of hundreds of unyielding eyes. In that moment, there were no ranks, no titles, no gap between leader and people, soldier and farmer. All stood together before the same truth. The gold that once divided them had become the witness of justice. Then, in a voice that carried through the depths of the tunnel, Traoré declared, "From this day on, this land will no longer be our grave. It will be the birthplace of justice." And as he spoke, the drums struck 3 solemn beats, the sound of a people's justice awakening beneath the earth. At sunrise over the Sahel, the first global headline blazed across the world. American executives kneel in Burkina Faso's underground gold tunnel. The image flooded every screen, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, France 24, each showing the same frame, the blinding gold light, the bowed faces, and Captain Traoré's voice echoing through the tunnels, sharp as steel. "You can buy the land, but not its soul." In Washington, the U.S. State Department erupted. Doors slammed, phones screamed, and a red-faced advisor shouted, "We're being broadcast to the world as thieves." But the truth was far crueler. Independent media began releasing the documents Leila Khan had exposed hundreds of pages of contracts, emails, and bank transfers. Names of powerful corporations, Swiss banks, and European officials glared back from the files. Not just America, Europe itself was being dragged into the storm. In a bank office in Zurich, a secret emergency meeting unfolded. A man's cold voice crackled through a leaked recording. "We've laundered the gold through 5 shell companies. No one can trace it." But someone had traced it, and within hours, the recording was everywhere. In just 24 hours, global gold markets convulsed. Mining stocks crashed. And across Africa, Mali, Niger, Ghana, Kenya, people poured into the streets shouting the same name, Traoré. A French headline captured it all. "One man, one tunnel, the collapse of the old order." In the Radio UA Libre studio, Leila Khan watched the screens flicker, her hands trembling slightly. She knew she had lit a fuse that could no longer be put out. Speaking softly into the microphone, she said, "Truth is sometimes the last bullet left to those with no weapons." At the U.S. State Department, a young official read the latest report and whispered almost to himself, "We didn't just lose gold. We lost our morality." No one replied. The silence itself was a verdict. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Captain Traoré stood on a balcony draped with the national flag, gazing toward the horizon. Below him, thousands chanted in unison, "Our gold, our justice." He didn't raise his fist or wave. He simply turned to Layla, who was filming, and said quietly, "They thought they took the gold, but they never knew gold remembers." The Sahel wind swept through the streets, carrying the roar of thousands into one great, rising voice, the sound of a continent awakening. While the chants of "Our gold, our justice" still thundered across the square, another storm was gathering inside the government palace. A storm of betrayal. In a dimly lit room draped with velvet curtains, a pale glow fell across the face of a man. Minister Alan Tapsoba, senior advisor, the very one who had once stood beside Captain Traoré at every press conference, the man who had sworn, "I will live and die to protect our nation's resources." On the table, a laptop screen flickered, an email thread glared back in cold light. Sender, Alan Tapsoba. Recipient, a mining corporation in New York. Message, I will transfer the geological survey data. In return, wire 5 million USD to the Swiss account. Traoré's eyes paused at the last line. No anger, no shouting, only a still cold silence. "He once told me," Traoré murmured, "we need someone inside to know the enemy's plans." Turns out the enemy was inside. He stood, arrest him, broad daylight. That noon, military trucks rolled through the main boulevard. Citizens thought it was a parade. It wasn't. It was a ceremony of justice, bloodless, but enough to shake a nation. The gates of Tapsoba's villa burst open. The minister, in a spotless suit, stepped out with a strained diplomatic smile. "Captain, this must be a misunderstanding. I can explain." "No need," Traoré interrupted, holding up the printed email. "Explain it to the people. They're waiting for you." Cameras whirred. Crowds surged toward the gates. A grieving mother raised a photo of her son lost in the mines. A farmer clenched a handful of dry soil and threw it at the minister's shoes. No one shouted traitor. No one cursed. Only silence. The kind that makes every excuse meaningless. Traoré looked at him, voice low but cutting. "You didn't sell gold. You sold memory. You didn't steal money. You stole faith." Two soldiers stepped forward. The cuffs clicked shut sharp, metallic, echoing down the street like the toll of a bell for corruption's death. Layla Khan filmed everything. Her lens caught the moment when the captain turned slightly and said softly, "If we strike the thieves at our borders but ignore the ones in our palaces, then justice is still only half-born." As the truck carried Tapsoba away, the crowd stood still. Then, in one united breath, they spoke the same words, slow, clear, unbroken. No one stands above the truth. And that day, in the heart of Burkina Faso, for the first time in generations, justice ceased to be a slogan. It became a vow carved into the people's hearts. A week after Tapsoba's arrest, while the capital still buzzed with news, a quieter movement began to spread across the nation. Not protests, not gunfire, but the sound of children's footsteps. It started in a small school in Kaya. Teacher Yasin Traoré brought a stack of golden paper into the classroom and said, "Today, we won't learn letters. Today, you'll write what you want to build with our country's gold." The room fell silent. Then, one by one, small hands began to move. One child wrote, "A clean water well." Another drew a little hospital scrawling beneath it, "For my mother's cough." A boy, quiet in the corner, wrote just 3 words, "A home roof." And the next morning, the teacher pinned their papers to the wall, took a photo, and posted it online with the caption, "These are the dreams of Burkina Faso's youngest owners." The photos spread like wildfire. Within 2 days, thousands of schools joined in. Children across the provinces made paper gold bars and wrote simple dreams upon them. A school, medicine, a meal with meat, all Blake. Then they carried those papers in their hands, walking from village to village, forming what people began to call the river of paper gold, flowing all the way toward the capital. When the first wave of children arrived in Ouagadougou's main square, the crowd fell silent in awe. Thousands of boys and girls, barefoot, dressed in white, holding up their paper gold to the Sunday. No chants, no anger, only clear eyes and steady steps full of quiet pride. Captain Traoré was notified. He left his meeting mid-sentence and walked straight to the square. When he appeared, the children fell still. A little girl, about 10, stepped forward and handed him a piece of paper gold. Written on it were the words, A hospital for my little sister. Traoré knelt and asked softly, "Where is your sister now?" "She died," the girl said calmly, "from dirty water." He gripped the paper in his hand, his voice trembling. "From today, this gold doesn't belong only to the grown-ups. It belongs to your dreams, and I will keep that promise." Leila Khan captured the moment, the soldier leader kneeling amid a sea of white-clad children, paper gold fluttering in the wind like thousands of small, living flames. That evening on national television, there was no political speech. Only the image of Captain Traoré kneeling, gold paper in hand, surrounded by the laughter of children. And the narrator's voice said, "A nation is truly rich only when its children still dare to dream." And in that moment, Burkina Faso was no longer just a story of rebellion, it had become a story of rebirth, written in the language of dreams. That day, Burkina Faso breathed again. The entire capital stood still before the towering smokestacks of the National Gold Refinery, where, for the first time in history, gold was being melted not for export, but to be returned to the people. Inside the plant, the furnaces roared, white flames blazing like miniature suns. Chunks of raw gold, once hidden in the secret vaults of foreign corporations, were now melting in the open as cheers from outside shook the walls. It was no longer their gold. It was the land's own heart, reclaiming itself. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stepped onto the platform through the haze and heat. He wore no uniform, only a simple black shirt. In his hands was the first gold bar, freshly cast, still so hot it had to rest on a cloth. Its glow touched his face, not blinding, but warm, like the first light of dawn. Lifting it high before the workers and the millions watching live on television, he spoke slowly, each word striking like a hammer on steel. For generations, our gold left this soil to build palaces elsewhere. Today, we reverse that history. This gold will become hospitals, schools, homes, and clean water. It will no longer be a symbol of greed. It will stand as the proof of justice. Applause erupted like thunder. Inside the foundry, workers wiped sweat from their faces and watched molten gold swirl through the molds like rivers of light. An old miner standing beside Leila Khan wept openly. "I buried my brother in a tunnel," he whispered. "Today, I see him alive again in this gold." Leila lifted her camera, capturing the moment Traoré laid the gleaming bar engraved with the national crest into a great ceremonial tray. "From this day forward," he declared, "every bar of gold will bear the mark of our people, not the signature of a bank. Every ounce of metal will be a brick for the future." Outside, the crowd roared as one, "Our gold, our future." The chant blended with the deep rumble of the furnaces, creating a symphony of earth and humanity. No one commanded them, yet the people knelt together not before gold, but before what it now meant. The narrator's voice fell to a final, resonant whisper. They once said gold was the root of all evil. But today, in Burkina Faso, gold was purified by fire and turned into faith. And that fire, the fire of rebirth, would never die again. That morning, the air in the capital hung heavy like wind before a storm. A convoy of black diplomatic vehicles, marked with US flags, rolled slowly down the main boulevard. Tinted windows, silent engines, the kind of silence that precedes negotiation, not peace. Crowds lined both sides of the street watching, not shouting, not throwing stones. They understood this was no longer a battle of weapons, but a battle of will. The steel gates of the National Security Compound groaned open. The convoy stopped. From the lead SUV stepped David Monroe, the U.S. Deputy Ambassador, suit crisp, tie dark, eyes a mix of worry and arrogance. He walked forward to where Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood, hands clasped behind his back, face calm, unflinching. "Captain," Monroe began, "I come on behalf of the United States government to demand the immediate release of our citizens. Their detention violates international law." Traoré said nothing. Behind him, rows of soldiers stood firm, sunlight glinting off rifles and the red, green, gold flags snapping in the wind. "You may call this diplomacy," Monroe pressed, his tone tightening, "but the world will see it as hostility. If you want stability, Captain, cooperate." At last, Traoré spoke, his voice low, but striking like a hammer on steel. "Stability? When they stole our gold and poisoned our children's water, that was your stability? Today, we are only doing what international law forgot to do, bringing crimes into the light." Monroe's jaw clenched. He gripped his briefcase tighter. You don't understand the consequences, Captain. Sanctions, isolation, no aid. This country will collapse. Traoré stepped forward. Now, only a breath separated them. We've lived without gold, without power, without your aid. But we cannot live without dignity. You can take everything from us except that. Camera shutters clicked. The roar of recording phones filled the air. From beyond the gates, thousands of voices began to rise. Not deals, not surrender, all low. The chant swelled down the boulevard like a breaking wave. Monroe's eyes darted toward the crowd. He realized he wasn't surrounded by soldiers. He was surrounded by a nation. He leaned in, voice low, warning, "You're playing with fire, Captain." Traoré looked up into the blazing Sahel sky and answered softly, "No, I'm reforging the world." He turned and walked away. The iron gates slammed shut behind him. Outside, the drums of the Sahel thundered. The crowd's chant grew into a single rolling voice. Burkina Faso never kneel again. And beneath the harsh noon sun, it was clear to all the balance of power in the world had shifted. Beneath the earth, the golden tunnel blazed once more, but this time it wasn't the cold glare of reporters' lights or the furnace's fire. It was the light of justice. Hundreds of torches flickered along the tunnel walls, their flames dancing on gold veins that shimmered like a sun trapped underground. At the center knelt 5 foreign men. Before them sat the Council of Elders of the People. No robes, no gavels, no marble benches, only farmers, miners, teachers, and nurses, the living soul of a nation reborn. There were no judges, no defense attorneys, only truth. The drums struck 3 solemn beats, then silence. An old woman rose, Madame Fatimata, head of the council. Her voice was slow, every word falling like stone upon metal. "You came here promising jobs, but what you left behind were graves. You spoke of progress, yet sowed only sickness and poisoned water. Now you will hear judgment not from a government, but from the people." One of the men dared to lift his head, stammering, "We only follow the contracts." Fatimata cut him off, her eyes sharp as steel. "And who signed the contract that allowed children's blood to run in the wells?" Silence fell thick, unbearable. Captain Traoré stood behind them, silent. He didn't need to speak. This was not his moment. It was the country's voice rising in its own tongue. A miner, the man who had lost his brother, stepped forward. He pointed at the kneeling men. "You made us work like beasts. Now work as men. Stay here. Dig again, but not for gold. Dig to bury your own greed." And the echo of his words filled the chamber. No shouting, no rage, only a murmured heartbeat of one word whispered by hundreds of lips. "Justice. Justice." Fatimata raised her trembling hand and declared, "By the judgment of the people of Burkina Faso, you shall remain on this land for the rest of your lives, laboring to rebuild what you destroyed. This is your punishment and your chance for redemption." The drums thundered once more. Soldiers stepped forward, chains clinking. The sound of metal striking stone rang through the tunnels like the verdict of a century. Then Madame Salamata Doumbia stepped forth, her palm resting gently on the glowing wall of gold. "This," she whispered, "is justice because it was carved by the hands of the people." As the prisoners were led away, the word justice erupted, roaring from the depths of the mine, bursting through the tunnel mouth and echoing across the blue Sahel sky. That day, Burkina Faso rewrote its law, not in ink, but in the unbreakable courage of its people. The next morning, sunlight draped Ouagadougou like a freshly washed golden cloth. But this time, gold no longer hid beneath the ground. It had stepped into the light, becoming a promise. Inside the government hall, before ministers, village chiefs, and citizens, Captain Ibrahim Traoré laid down his pen upon a document embossed with the national seal. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "National Restoration Decree. Gold for the people." He spoke slowly, his voice forged in steel. "All gold recovered from the gold tunnel case will never again rest in foreign banks. It will be used here now to rebuild our land and heal our people's wounds." A wave of applause rose, quiet but trembling with emotion. In the front row sat Madame Salamata Doumbia, brought from her village for this moment. Her clouded eyes glistened as she watched his signature spread across the page. The decree had 3 parts. First, rebuild the poisoned villages, raise solid homes for those who lost everything. Second, cleanse the water, restore the dead wells, and return the rivers to the farmers. Third, build schools and hospitals so the children who once held paper gold could now hold pencils and dreams. That very afternoon, convoys rolled out of the capital, trucks loaded with pipes, cement, bricks, and tools. Young soldiers rode beside engineers, engineers beside farmers. Faces once darkened by hardship now shone with something rare pride. In Salamata's village, the air filled with the rumble of excavators and the laughter of neighbors. They dug again, this time not for gold, but for life. When the first stream burst from the earth, muddy at first, then clear, the old woman fell to her knees, cupped the water in her hands, and cried out, "It doesn't smell anymore, it's alive again." Beside her, Layla Khan raised her camera, tears fogging the lens. She knew this was the most important shot of her life, one with no blood, no sorrow, only faith reborn. That evening, the national broadcast showed Captain Traoré standing before a large map. Beneath his feet, glowing red dots marked the dead villages, now shining with renewal. His voice carried across the airwaves. Justice does not end when a verdict is read. Justice begins when homes rise again, when clean water flows back into our people's hands. Across the country, drums began to beat. From distant villages to the capital square, voices rose as one. Justice builds. In that night, gentle rain fell, soft drops sinking into cracked soil, healing the wounds of the earth itself. And so, Burkina Faso began its symphony of rebirth, not with guns, but with the hands of its people. The news of the Gold for the People decree spread faster than the Sahel wind. Within days, newspapers from Mali, Niger, Ghana, Kenya, Congo, and South Africa all printed the same image: Captain Ibrahim Traoré, signing the decree beneath the red-green-gold flag. Across social media, the hashtag #OneAfrica exploded. Photos of Burkina Faso's children holding paper gold, of wells flowing again, of hospitals rising from the dust spread across the continent like wildfire. In Bamako, thousands gathered before the parliament building, raising banners. If the ECOWAS can do breakaway it, states of Burkina Faso and Mali, former miners locked hands and sang, "Give the land back to our children." End of. In Kinshasa, students painted golden letters on the university walls. Justice is not a dream, it has begun. And in Nairobi, young people marched through the streets waving the Burkinabe flag. They weren't chanting for a single nation. They were chanting for a whole continent. Africa for Africans. Governments that once stayed silent before foreign mining giants began to tremble. Emergency meetings, public statements, apologies. But it was too late. The awakening had crossed every border, rekindling the continent's shared memory. International media called it the Gold Tunnel Effect. Le Monde wrote, "A small nation in the Sahel has ignited the gentlest revolution of all, the revolution of dignity." And so, an American journalist asked on live television, "What mine says AE television, if justice can be forged in fire, has Africa just rediscovered its flame?" At the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, something unseen in decades happened. Leaders rose to their feet, applauding as Burkina Faso's flag filled the screen. A West African head of state declared, "We no longer seek aid. We seek the right to keep what is ours." In city streets, children painted murals of Traoré not as a war hero, but as a sower of seeds. Beneath every painting appeared words in many languages. Justice is Africa's new gold. On international broadcast, Layla Khan closed her report with a trembling voice. A fire from Burkina Faso is lighting the continent. They call it a miracle, but in truth, it's what happens when people stop being afraid. That night, in every capital, the drums began to beat, one rhythm, one heart. People once divided by borders sang a single song. One Africa, one continent, one heart, one future. And from that night forward, the continent no longer bowed its head. Africa had reason. A year after the historic trial, the Gold Tunnel, the once feared Chamber of Judgment, had a new name, the National Shrine of Memory. On Inauguration Day, thousands came from across the provinces carrying flowers, jars of water, handfuls of earth, and faded sheets of paper gold. There were no uniforms, no chains, only people and remembrance. At the entrance, draped in the red-green-gold flag, stood a bronze plaque engraved with the words, "This was once a place where gold was stolen. Now it is a place where memory is kept." Inside, gentle golden light spilled across the walls. Along the tunnel, bronze tablets bore the names of villages destroyed and of those who had perished. At the center stood a single block of raw gold, unpolished, untouched, resting upon a black stone pedestal, carved by hand into the base with 3 lines: "For the people, for the land, for the future." Madame Salamata Doumbia walked slowly with her cane, stopping before the plaque that bore her grandson's name, Karim. Her trembling hand brushed over each letter. "He's remembered now," she whispered. "This land will never forget him again." Beside her, Captain Traoré bowed his head, his hand resting on the rough gold. In that moment, he was no longer the commander, just a son of the soil, silently asking forgiveness for years of silence. Outside the tunnel, Leila Khan spoke softly into her microphone. This is where justice becomes memory, and memory becomes faith. When they stepped out, the Sahel sunlight poured down in brilliance. Hundreds of children in white uniforms ran forward, laughing, waving flowers and fresh paper gold in their hands. They surrounded Captain Traoré in a circle of laughter. A little girl looked up and held out her gold paper, on which she had written, "A library for all children." He took it gently, smiled, and whispered, "I promise." The camera rose slowly. Behind him, the golden entrance of the tunnel shimmered. Before him, a sea of people and a sky of pure blue. The narrator's voice deepened, slow, resonant, like a message meant for every generation. They thought gold was the treasure, but gold was only the witness. The true treasure is the dignity restored and the faith humanity found in its own light. That night, across Africa, screens of every size flickered with the same image: Captain Ibrahim Traoré emerging from the golden tunnel, surrounded by children's laughter. The final words appeared on the screen. "If you believe justice is humanity's truest gold, leave 2 words. One Africa, on." The story of Burkina Faso is not about gold, it is about the human soul, something no one can steal as long as we still dare to rise. From the depths of the earth, they forge justice anew. From pain, they cast faith in the shape of hope. If you believe that dignity is the truest gold of humankind, if you believe that Africa and every people deserve to live in freedom, then leave 2 words in the comments. One Africa. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so together we can keep this flame alive. For when a nation learns to stand, its light shines for the whole world. One Africa, one continent, one heart, one future.